Hello, everyone. Welcome to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. On this lovely Wednesday, March 22nd, we're here this morning to pick up the conversation we had a few weeks ago about the administration's proposal around Medicare Advantage. There's been an awful lot of communication to us on the committee and other legislators about this particular issue. So I wanted to pick back up on the conversation and also take a look at some suggested language that legislative council has prepared. Several legislators have kind of looked at different potential proposals and made some clarifications about this particular issue. And so Damian Leonard from legislative council is here to walk us through a proposal that I'm putting on the table to suggest to our colleagues in House Appropriations to be included in the big bill. So Damian, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. Thank you. For the record, Damian Leonard, Legislative Counsel. Andrea, could you send me the Zoom link, please?
Do you want to share your screen?
I assume, do you want to share me to share my screen or just walk through it?
Not do screen share.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Damian, you're not.
Never mind.
In our committee. So
I really do need to spend more time down here.
I'd love to have you down here more. So that we can, when there are people testifying, by Zoom, so that we can continue to see the people. It's been our practice to use our own devices and just have the.
Well, that's refreshing. Faces. I like it.
So yeah, we do have the language under your name on our legislative page.
So as the chair said, he asked legislative counsel to prepare some language. The language would amend 3 VSA 479. So if you look at the introductory language, I believe I touched on this with you a month or two ago when I first spoke to you about this issue. And so this is the language that provides a member who is insured by the respective group insurance plans immediately preceding the member's effective date of retirement shall be entitled to continuation of group insurance. And what this amendment would add, if you turn to page 2, is a new subdivision 2 that provides that notwithstanding any provision of subdivision 1A1 or 2 of this subsection, a member may be offered health coverage other than coverage in the group medical benefit plan provided by the state for active state employees if the following conditions are met. So what it's doing is it's setting out conditions for the state to offer something besides continuation in the group medical benefit plan for state employees to retired state employees. So one, the alternative has to be substantially equivalent to the coverage offered through the group plan to active state employees. And 2, the alternative health coverage must be mutually agreeable to the state, the labor organization or organizations representing active state employees who will be members of Group C, Group F, or Group G following retirement. So these are regular classified state employees, corrections employees, and state troopers. And then the organization or organizations representing retired state employees in Groups C, F, and G that are not a labor organization described in subdivision 1. So, and that is that last bit there is just to clarify that the unions representing current state employees who have an interest in what sort of coverage they'll have when they retire don't get 2 seats at the table. So but then also acknowledging that there are organizations like the state retired employees. I think I messed up the name already. I'm sorry.
I think referring to the VRSEA, the Vermont Retired State Employees.
Vermont Retired State Employees Association. Thank you. I not had enough coffee this morning. So the VRSEA is not a labor union, but they do represent retired state employees. And so they would get to also say, yes, this is mutually agreeable to our members. So essentially, It really should be 3 items in the list now that I'm looking at it. It should be 1, the state, 2, the labor organization or organizations representing active state employees, and 3, the organization or organizations representing retired state employees that are not a labor union representing active state employees. And so if you could get that mutual agreement and the coverage was substantially equivalent to what's provided under the group health benefit plan, then you can agree to the coverage and you can have the alternative health coverage. The remainder of the amendment is just crossing our T's and dotting our I's by adding references to the alternative coverage throughout the remainder of the section. Are there questions?
There will be a lot of questions. I want to ask a couple of clarifying questions before I open things up to the committee. So would it be fair to say another way of saying what this accomplishes is it doesn't completely close the door on some alternative coverage being offered to retirees, but it says that it needs to be a permissive subject of bargaining, that there needs to be an agreement between not just the bargaining unit, the state employees, but also the retirees and the administration in order for some alternative to actually be put into effect.
Right. So it's basically requiring that the 3 sides come together and agree before a change is made.
Representative Hooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You used the word bargaining. I don't know that that's appropriate in this particular environment.
Yes, this is not the collective bargaining agreement.
Yes.
This is mutual agreement between the 3 parties. The collective bargaining agreement would likely include language related to retirement in it, but this is separate from the collective bargaining process. So this is a separate agreement which would between not only the labor union and the state, but also the retired state employees organizations. So that
Sure. Okay.
they wouldn't have a collective bargaining agreement with the state because they're no longer state employees.
So I'm going to be picky.
Please.
In the second page, sub 2, it uses the word offered. I assume that that's an offer you can't refuse, or that no individual state employee is going to have, or retired state employee is going to have the option of saying, no, thank you, Jimmy J.J. Walker, I'm not interested in your.
Well, so this is the coverage offered through the group medical benefit plan provided for active state employees. And that's acknowledging that not every state employee takes coverage under the state health plan. So it's offered. You may choose not to enroll on health coverage through the state.
In subsection A, then we say substantially. What is the definition of that?
So substantially, it has its regular meaning, which means essentially, or for the most part, equivalent to. So it doesn't have to be identical. But to a significant extent, it has to be equivalent to the state employees plan. This recognizes that when you're, for retirees who are on Medicare, their coverage needs are different from someone who's not Medicare eligible. And so they may take different coverage. And I want to be clear with everyone here, I am not the health insurance expert in our office. Those 2 attorneys are scheduled elsewhere this morning. I deal with collective bargaining. So if I misspeak on health benefit plans, please bear with me. But my understanding is that you may look at a different plan that covers things that are not covered by Medicare, et cetera, but provides substantially equivalent coverage. So it could. And the important part here is it's not a unilateral decision about what that is. So all 3 parties will get to decide whether that coverage is substantially equivalent. And if one party says no, it doesn't go forward.
And maybe lastly, this covers retired state employees. Building over here that represents people who yell equal justice under law, and I noticed they are not included in the Group D judicial branch.
So Group D is, let me just.
So do we assume they will continue as it is now?
Yes, this does not include Group D. They are not mentioned in that section at present. So I don't know what Group D has for coverage currently. And so I'd have to look into that. So what we did is we went through that section. It mentions groups F, G, and C. And so we kept them in.
So at this point, there is no consideration of Group D changing.
No, there is not.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to follow up before I go to Representative Waters Evans. So when you had said in one of your previous comments, Damien, if we were to pass something like this language, would it make it so that if one of the three parties couldn't agree, would there be a chance that a different plan could be imposed through arbitration? It seems like it's trying to negate that, but I just wanted to make that really clear.
So this is outside of the collective bargaining process. So collective bargaining has the option of last best offer or arbitration. And so it's last best offer in front of basically the state labor board or an arbitrator that's chosen by the parties. This is outside of that because we're bringing in a group that is not collectively bargaining an employment contract with the state. And it says mutually agreeable to. So at this point, each party has essentially a veto to the plan moving forward. If they don't agree, then the plan's got to change until they agree or the plan doesn't go forward.
That was fine. Question on clarifying the word bargaining being used.
Representative.
My question was answered, thank you. Thanks.
So Damien, why don't you stick with us? I don't see any more hands up, but if you can be available to
Absolutely.
clarify other questions, I think we've got a number of people who've asked to testify with us this morning. So we'll, that the commissioner has a time limit here. So Commissioner Fastigi, would you like to take the witness seat? Thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, and I have two folks that, if you wouldn't mind, could.
Yeah, if you want to bring folks up, we can, and if folks want to slide chairs up, I'm happy to have you bring the team.
Okay. Slide it over. Clark's in the wobbly seats. Over there. Good morning, thank you. My name is Beth Fastigi. I'm the Commissioner of Human Resources for the state of Vermont. I'm happy to be back in front of this committee, and with me is Clark Collins. He's the Deputy Director of Benefits and Wellness for the state of Vermont and the Department of Human Resources, and Steve May, who is one of our benefits consultants at Hickok and Boardman Consultants. Hickok and Boardman Business Intelligence, right? Is that right? Organization. So, and just to be clear, just up front, the state has said in many forums that we are not unilaterally forcing Medicare Advantage plan on retirees, and we have said so. So I just wanted to say that up front before I start, but I wanted to kind of give you a background of how we procure healthcare plans for our employees and retirees, and just kind of go through that. Last time I was here, we didn't have as much time as you scheduled for us today. So I could walk through that, that would be great. So we, the Department of Human Resources, manage the healthcare benefits for eligible state employees and retirees. The unions bargain healthcare benefits. For example, they bargain the copays, the deductibles, level of coverage, and things like that. Both state employees as well as retirees have excellent healthcare coverage. We are required by statute to provide the same level of benefits to retirees. And we contract with vendors to administer those benefits for active employees and two populations of retirees. There's the retirees who are not eligible for Medicare, and then the ones who are eligible for Medicare, those are typically 65 and over are the ones who are eligible for Medicare. And so those who are eligible for Medicare, they get Medicare as their primary coverage, and then we use the state plan as a wraparound to provide those extra coverages that Medicare doesn't provide. And that's how it works today. We've been aware of Medicare Advantage plans for a long time. Group Medicare Advantage plans only became recently available in Vermont. And every 4 years, with the assistance of benefits consultants, or sometimes, it doesn't have to be every 4 years, but that's our typical cycle. We go out to bid on our health insurance provider contracts. These are large, complex contracts, and the procurement process takes about a year to complete. Our contracts expired on 12/31/22, which means in January of 2022, so more than a year, a little over a year ago, that's when we started the procurement process for the contracts beginning January 1st of this year. So when we put those contracts out for bid, we asked for alternative proposals and additional proposals and options to explore what Medicare Advantage would look like for our over 65 retirees. So we did that as an exploratory option. We were encouraged by the Treasurer's Office to seek that opportunity because recently, beginning 1/1/22, they moved the teachers' retirees over to a customized Medicare Advantage plan. And we're also encouraged by the State Auditor's Office to look at what the Treasurer's Office was doing with respect to healthcare benefits for retirees and significant reductions that provided in the post-employment healthcare benefits. And we're also aware that that UVM and Vermont State Universities had moved over their retiree population to Medicare Advantage plans as well. So prior to going to bid, we shared our bid documents that included requests for Medicare Advantage proposals with our VSEA representatives. We shared those on 2/17/22, and we received feedback from them in a marked up bid document from the VSEA representatives. And then we released the RFP on 3/2/22. And at that point, Medicare Advantage was still just in an exploratory phase. We weren't confident that vendors would be able to prepare proposals for us that would actually match our coverage. And construct that. So when we received the proposals back from vendors on beginning of April, we began to dig into them, and we were really intrigued by the Medicare Advantage proposals in both the cost savings that to the state and the retirees were substantial, and including a lot of extra benefits that we don't currently offer to our employees. So we were just really kind of excited about the opportunity, and then we began to explore them more. So in the vendor presentations, we asked them to also do a segment on the Medicare Advantage proposals, which were actually very intriguing as well. We were very impressed, and so we really began to review the proposals and the plan design to see if we could, with our due diligence, match what we have. And we found that through negotiations with the vendors, we could match and exceed the benefits that we had under the current plan, which would be a highly customized Medicare Advantage group plan. So some of the benefits that we saw that we could offer were basically all the same coverage, but with the state that they get now with Medicare and the state plan supplement, the same prescription drug coverage, which right now is currently a little different from retirees and Medicare eligible retirees and active employees and under 65. So the age 65 retirees prescription drug program is under an EGWP plan, which is an employee group waiver plan that is actually through Medicare. If I could say Medicaid. Did I ever say Medicaid? Sometimes I slip and say Medicaid instead of Medicare. Okay.
You were right.
We get subsidies from the federal government to help us pay for that plan, which means that we have to follow Medicare rules for that. So those prescription drug plans, even though they're the same provider and they maintained the same provider in the new contract, which is Express Scripts, they're a subsidiary of an organization called Cigna. So we contracted with them before, we're contracting with them now, but those retiree plan is a little different than the active employee plan because we have to follow the Medicare rules in their formulary. And we actually had a side agreement to move to that, what's called the EGWP plan in 2014 with the VSDA and the VTA.
The EGWP plan is for the prescription drug plan, like what we're talking about for the Medicare Advantage plan.
Just to be clear, the current difference between the way Medicare eligible retirees are served under EGWP was negotiated with the VSEA under a side letter.
Yes. All right. I kind of went down into I went away from my notes, so let's see where we're back. Okay, so I think that last time I was here, I kind of talked about the additional benefits that retirees would receive under a Medicare Advantage plan. And it would include expanding the network nationally to see any provider that accepted Medicare and also any provider that's within that provider's network. So it would expand our retiree network of who they could see. Because that includes anyone that takes Medicare, that's 99% of all the healthcare providers in the United States. So most people take Medicare. So they would have access to any credentialed provider in or out of network at the same cost share with no additional referrals required. And they would have the same, and I talked about financial impacts before. Our retirees would receive significant savings. We calculated it, if we had been able to implement that January 1st, 2023, which would have been the earliest because that's when we received proposals to start. We calculated we would receive about 9 million total cost savings between the state and the retirees annually, with the state receiving 80% of the savings and then retirees receiving 20%, because like active employees, retirees pay for 20% of the cost and the state pays 80% of the share for healthcare benefits. So when we had decided, this was at this point, this was a proposal that we had been looking at. We hadn't shared it with the administration. Clark, myself, Steve May were really encouraged by it. We brought the proposal to the Secretary of Administration, who got to the governor, and they were also very supportive of moving forward with this type of plan because they saw, it's very hard to argue with better coverage, increased savings. So we moved forward. The next step there, once they agreed that we wanted to kind of move forward with this, was to contact the unions and bring that proposal with them, to have some discussions with them. We knew that there would be a lot of questions throughout the bid process. We had heard from the VSEA representatives, even though they had participated they really weren't supportive of any changes. So we asked to meet with them. The reaction from the VSEA has been pretty hostile from the beginning. By the end of September, they had already contacted their lawyer and told us to cease and desist. But we continued to reach out and try to have conversations with them. And we had very good conversations also with the Vermont Retired State Employees Association. just really to try to hear what their concerns were and answer their questions. And that's really the phase we are in. As you mentioned, there's been a lot of, you've heard from a lot of retirees that are very concerned. They're very fearful of losing health coverage or having decreased health care coverage. I'm here to say that that is in no way anybody's intention. We want to provide our retirees the same or better coverage that we provide our active employees, which, as we know, is really a great plan. We provided a letter to the Senate President Pro Tem and the Speaker of the House on the 6th of February, letting them know that we would not be unilaterally imposing this Medicare Advantage. We really wanted to bargain that, and we reached out to the VSEA and the VTA at the same time, asking to bargain these benefits. And we did receive responses back from the VSEA, basically saying that they did not want to open the contract for bargaining at this time. Our next chance for what we call is I call it our big bargaining, that's probably not the right terminology, is we start bargaining for the next contracts in the fall of this year, which would be bargaining for the contracts that would begin, in the next cycle. I'm just going to say the next cycle, not to get confused.
Probably not impact until FY25.
Right. We're in our first year of the contract, so in fiscal year 24 will be the second year of the contract. So July 1st, 2024, we would be into our new contract. And we do start negotiating that this fall. So as I said, will be moving forward until we are able to bargain a Medicare Advantage product for our retirees. And we've got additional time for education at this point and questions. Both Clark and Steve have been answering and responding to a lot of questions. They're continuing to come in. We're continuing to respond to those. Not sure. I'm not sure if there's anything else that I wanted to say, but I did want to turn it over to, who's got more notes? Who wrote down more notes? I'm going to turn it over to Clark Collins, and he's been responding to answering most of the questions that have come through into our office from retirees. So I think that he can go ahead and add a few more.
Start, Representative Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. Quick question,
Yeah.
Commissioner. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot by asking,
Sure.
but if I am, say, yep, or whatever. But is that your desired position, is to get to that point with this process? In other words, bargaining this into plans for VSA, VRSEA. Is that your desired?
Right, our sole bargain, we bargain with the VSEA and the VTA. They're for us and the executive branch, those are our sole bargaining agents.
Yes.
So that's who we bargain with, yes, and our goal would be to bargain with them.
To bargain this plan into their.
Right, into the plan,
Into the plan.
just like we did with the Ag Whip in 2014.
That's what I thought I heard.
Yep.
I just want to verify it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Higley and then Representative Hoop.
Yeah, thank you. So the question I've got is, it looks like April of last year, you received the proposals after putting out the RFPs. Is there a time limit on whatever company you were to choose to honor that proposal?
Proposals are delivered with time limits stated. But as we go through the process, if it's extended further than we think it's going to be, we check in regularly to verify the pricing either still holding or some pricing, if the pricing has to change. In this case, early on, the pricing held. There were some federal regulations that changed that would have altered the pricing a little bit. We had negotiations or discussions around what that would be. And how much that would affect the rate. And the bidder that we were speaking with at the time was comfortable with the rates.
just to follow up, again, once you accept that and all parties are agreeable, that would stay in place and not change for 3 years, is that correct?
The proposal in this case for this coverage was a multi-year guarantee, yes.
Thank you.
Representative Hooper.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning, Representative.
As it exists right now, we have a plan that is, excuse me, self-funded, and our rate increases and our overall rate is pretty favorable as compared to the regular private market. We would effectively be taking our plan commercial, and this would effectively be a loose equivalent of an HMO once implemented.
Yes and no. I'm going to turn that, who wants to answer that?
I'll let Steve answer that.
Go ahead.
I can take the first step.
Okay. Yeah.
Essentially what I'm saying is we're no longer in control of our plan. We're turning it over to somebody else.
Right, and CMS regulates what that plan is.
As opposed to, at this point, we make all the decisions internally as to what we cover and the rate that we charge and the reserves that we need and how we get our savings. We get our savings at this point by participating with a major insurance carrier in the record keeping end of things so that we enjoy their discounts effectively, right?
Yeah.
Our premiums are entirely set internally through our, with our actuarial help from Peacock and Boardman, but yeah.
So that being the case, where is the $9 million coming from?
So it's a direct comparison to the premiums that were presented through this process and the current rates that the state charges for this plan. So the difference between the two sets of rates gives the 9 million. Underneath that, actually, the savings is a little better because the Medicare retirees are subsidized by the active and under 65, active employees and under 65 retirees. So their experience runs a little bit worse, but the group is rated together and kind of helps each other. So if you were to carve the Medicare population out and rate them on their own, their rate should be a little bit higher. So the actual savings would have been a little bit more than 9 million, but just comparing the rates that are currently in place versus what was proposed was 9 million. If you add the increase that was imposed January 1, it would be closer to 11 million.
Yeah, so we just, we increased our rates for employees and retirees this year by 11%. That was 11%, and next year we also are predicting increase as well. As we all know, costs of healthcare are increasing, and we are proposing, we expect that if trend continues the way it is, that we will have another increase, and it won't be, hopefully it won't be as high as it was this year, but it's still going to be higher, probably the next highest that it's been since I've been here, which, I mean, we've managed to keep things pretty low. And a lot of that has been through procurement and getting really good contracts with our providers, particularly back a few years back when we moved to moved away from a custom formulary for our prescription drugs. We ended up with very high level of savings. And so that helped us keep our rates low and not have increases for a couple of years.
So, yeah, drugs crazy. At this point, though, our increase is substantially lower than private industry increase, I would assume.
This year we were around the average, so we were in the above 10%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lastly, I think that the gnawing thing in a lot of people's minds is that, I mean, I just spent 6 months watching Joe Namath, J.J. Walker, Captain Kirk, take your pick. Tell me how great these things are. You're essentially saying that there will be no change noticeable to the participant. How do we guarantee that? a lot of I mean, Cigna is currently experiencing a lovely lawsuit for fraud and a couple of other unmentionable things. Where is our control?
I'm just going to say briefly, just for those, I think, who don't know what Representative Hooper was talking about, but individual Medicare Advantage plans are advertised all the time on television. It gets really heavy during open enrollment period in the fall. This plan is not that plan. Those plans all do get the same federal subsidies under the Medicare Advantage umbrella, where it's moving the risk of Medicare off of the federal Medicare into the private insurers, and the Medicare provides subsidies to those insurers to take that on. But this plan is completely different. It's custom designed, just like our employee plan. So it's complete. Our plan would be completely unique because our plan is our plan. And so we need to make sure that a retiree plan under a Medicare Advantage would have all those same things. So, for example, the coverage, mental health coverage, is one of the things that Medicare doesn't cover, like we cover it as far as the credentialed providers. So we included in our Medicare Advantage plan a provision that would enable employees or retirees to be able to keep the same providers. Who would be more, who are almost most of the providers that provide mental health coverage in the state. The same thing with naturopaths, which Medicare also doesn't cover. But Steve has a lot more he can add to that.
Yeah,
I
there's a lot
think
of,
you had the question about substantial previously.
Yeah.
So that's something when building a plan design, keep an eye on. And as we were looking at what was proposed, it's those kind of things that were added, the benefits built to match the benefit structure that we have now to get to that level before it could be proposed.
thank you. You brought up something that I remember from the last time. Indulgence, Mr. Chair. Substantial, this would currently bifurcate the system so that the retirees are under a contracted benefit plan where the state employees, the actives, would be under a bargained plan. And your response to my question, I think the last time, Commissioner, was that we would amend the contract to cover any enhancements that were offered to the active state employees so that it would be, the substantial would not be at the end of a contract period, but would be a flowing. Is that still your position?
Yes.
And I can speak to that somewhat as well. It's one of the things that we have heard in testimony, other testimony given about the Medicare Advantage plans in general, is the idea of losing that bargaining power. That if we did this, we would no longer have that protection that active employees have with the bargaining. What we've gotten when we've had discussions and negotiations with the vendor that we were speaking to at the time, we got not only assurances, but we would have written into the contract that any time something would occur with the active coverage that would impact retirees or that we would want to carry over to retirees, they would be willing and able to put that, change the contract for the retirees as well to include that coverage. An example that we have just right now during our negotiations was the hearing aid coverage. When that was negotiated and put through for the actives, when we had received proposals, that bargaining had not finalized. So that was not part of our initial ask. But once it was, we went and asked them to amend their proposal, and they went through that whole process and actually ended up getting a better benefit than actives that we're going to receive. So you would have that as part of the contract, that they would amend the contract on their end to include anything that would carry through from the collective bargaining.
So I just want to bring us all back to what we're doing here, because I think we've gotten way down in the weeds. So we've been asked to look at putting some guardrails on this discussion. It sounds to me like what you're saying, Commissioner Fastigi, is that it's been your intent to try to bring parties together to have some agreement. So I'm wondering if you have any high-level feedback about the proposal to try to have the SEA on behalf of current active state employees and an organization representing retirees kind of bless any proposal like this Medicaid.
And I think that's really what we tried to do at this point. I mean, that's why the governor and the secretary were very, we meet and discuss this potential changes with the unions and with retired organizations because they wanted people to be comfortable with it. So I think I think that's accurate. And I think that I can see, just kind of looking at the draft legislation that Damian has put forth, he's really tried to, with the part that talks about our bargaining entities, try to clarify the statute to put into what has been in practice for the ongoing, decades of practice. So, except for the addition of the retired folks having to agree, which now when we bargain our benefits, of course, it's with who we bargain with. So
I have a feeling that there will be significant conversation about that piece from our next couple of witnesses. Representative Morwicki, you had your hand up before. Did you?
I did. I just wanted to hold up the concern that I'm hearing from constituents, and it has to do with Cigna. Anecdotally, when we hear from both providers and patients, the most problems I hear is with Cigna. That we have limited major insurance carriers in Vermont, but I would have to say that there seem to be more problems with Cigna. And given there's dubious clouds and ominous clouds, given the lawsuit that was just mentioned here, I just wonder if we are wed to working with Cigna or if there's still other options that you're putting on the table.
So we're not wed to Cigna. I think given the question about timing with where things are now and how bargaining is opening, and this would demand another proposal process, request for proposal process. So it's more a discussion on what Medicare Advantage is currently. Thanks.
yeah, and I would also say that we did look at the Department of Financial Regulations website as far as complaints from providers, and that doesn't seem to be the experience from what they're hearing from complaints. Blue Cross Blue Shield is the highest level of complaints and Cigna was the lowest, but.
And those complaints are a bit dated when checking back to verify. Cigna has passed their audits with CMS with flying colors since, but that lawsuit is still there.
And were those complaints both from providers and patients?
On the DFR website, they're looking at consumer complaints, I believe.
One of the things I did find out anecdotally, though, that our own Medicaid system pays out pretty fast, where people can get payments within days, where it's often months with the larger providers.
Medicaid or Medicare?
Medicaid.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner, anything else you would like to leave us with? And I would invite you to stick around and respond to questions and concerns that were brought up.
Yeah. I think that's it. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for joining us this morning. So Steve Howard from the VSEA, I got you up next.
Mr. Chairman, if it's all right, the president of the VSEA now just would be.
I would not mind. Please, feel free to. We have another chair that's nearby up there. We can pull one from the gallery here. We're bumping up against our room capacity here today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Could you just introduce yourselves for the record and.
Sure.
Good Morning, everyone. Amy Town, State Employee, Department of Children and Families, Economic Services Division, 23 years, and current VSEA president.
I'm Steve Howard. I'm the executive director of the VSEA.
Thanks for being with us. So I'll give you the floor. I know you had several points that you wanted to comment on with the particular language and the issue in general.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start. I do have a handout, and I hopefully successfully emailed it to Andrea. I want to start by thanking the committee and you, Mr. Chairman, for taking this issue up and spending some valuable time on it. I want to just share this. Hopefully I'm not handing out. There we go.
This is the same one you emailed?
Yeah, it's the same one in case people want a hard copy of it.
For the most part, we issue paper here, and I believe there's a very similar handout that somebody already provided us that has the same language.
Yeah, it's the same. I would just want to start by saying, well, first of all, I don't want to go through all of the reasons why retired state employees, both formerly members of the bargaining unit and those who are not in the bargaining unit, universally oppose this proposal. I think you heard in my previous testimony all of our concerns about Medicare Advantage, about Cigna. I think since September 2nd, when we first heard about this proposal, we've heard, and you've probably heard from many constituents who have expressed concern about this. We do want to say that we agree that I think from what we've heard from a lot of our legislative friends is the current statute does make the imposition of Medicare Advantage illegal, that it cannot be unilaterally imposed, except for one loophole, which is what we want to talk with you about today. We did have time to review some of the language that you shared with us. And one thing that we want to just stress is we think it's vital that in the FY24 budget proposal from the House to the Senate, that there be language in the budget that does put guardrails around this issue in order to protect thousands of retirees who worked for decades for the state with a commitment that they would be part of the state employees plan. And changing the rules on them now seems a bit unfair and unreasonable. But we do think that there is the language that we have provided to you is what we would hope that you would adopt and recommend to the Appropriations Committee as a simplified version of a simplified approach to closing the one loophole that does exist. And that loophole is that we have about 250 active employees who are Medicare eligible. And that is the only group of employees for which it would be permissible for the administration to offer a proposal in bargaining around. They cannot do that unilaterally for retirees, but they could do it for active employees, which potentially might open the door to drawing in all of the retired state employees. So the language that we provided to you here today makes very clear that the retired state employees are in the same plan as non-Medicare eligible active employees. And that would close that loophole and prevent them from finding a backdoor way to force this plan on people who don't want it. So that's just our suggestion. We do have some concerns about the language or some suggestions maybe for improvement to the language that the committee submitted that Damien discussed earlier. And as I said, we are eager to work with you to come to some version that is, the best version we can pass. We just think it's absolutely critical that we pass something, some recommendation for the Appropriations Committee for this version of the budget. And we believe that our approach, while we'd be hopeful that you would adopt it, we understand that you might not, and we are willing to work with you on other language that is clear. And I can go through some of those concerns or some of those suggestions with the language that Damien presented, if you think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think it is helpful just to get the concerns on the table. I do want to say that given the fact that this is the money crossover week, and I appreciate you making it clear that your position is, please do something that puts guardrails around this. That was the intent with trying to have some language to clarify that in order to move forward with this kind of a proposal, that there would need to be buy-in from retirees, your organization representing active state employees, and the administration. I think the specificity that's in the proposal that you're bringing, it probably has some things that have merit, but I also, from what I understand from talking with Leg Council about this language, and maybe we can have Damien follow up on this once we've heard the next couple of witnesses, is that it may even prohibit what's happening right now with Egg Whip, which was negotiated with the side letter, but I'm just concerned that we want to be careful about exactly what the language is. We're also recognizing that with the legislative schedule, we need to kick off this conversation in some way. So I'm very happy to hear the specific concerns about the approach that Legislative Council put together for us.
Wonderful. I'll go through this quickly, and then I know President Town has some brief remarks she'd like to add to it. So with the proposal that Damien discussed earlier, the committee offered, we have just a couple of concerns. One is our members and our retired lifetime members and our active members all of our active members, but particularly those who are getting close to retirement, want to stay in the state employees plan as it exists today without a change. And so the language that committee is considering does open the door to an alternative plan, which our members have concerns about. So we would prefer that we maintain the status quo and that we close any loophole that might be exploited by the administration to force this plan on retirees. So that's one piece. We also do think that there would be some complication or in collective bargaining around that group that we're talking about if a group that is not party to those negotiations has a vote or veto over one element of those negotiations. So that is a concern that our members wanted to raise. The way it's worded now, we also feel that it would be important to name the non-bargaining unit group representing retirees so that there is clarity about who that group is. Because as it's written now, one concern we have is that 12 different groups could be formed with retirees, and they could all claim to be representing retirees, and then they would then be able to avail themselves of the process. And I don't think that was the intent of the language. I think you discussed it, that it was really about the VRSEA. We think it'd just be clearer to state that, even though I know that drives Leg Council crazy. There is a precedent for doing that. The SEA is mentioned in various places in the statute currently. And one other element that I think, Mr. Chairman, you alluded to in your question to Damien around the language requiring mutual agreement. We want to make sure that it's explicitly stated in anything that would be recommended to the Appropriations Committee that this is a permissive subject to bargaining, meaning that it could not, in the impasse procedure, if there was not agreement at the bargaining table, that an arbitrator couldn't impose this on the parties, that this would not be something that could go to an arbitrator in the final step of the impasse procedure. We just think that needs to be clarified, and I think Damien might have some ideas about that or thoughts about that as well. So I think that's really what I really wanted to bring to you. And again, we want to work with you. We really are grateful for the time and energy you've put into this, and we're hopeful that we can get to a solution with the understanding that time is ticking. And I know President Town had some additions that she wanted to offer as well.
So my remarks weren't to the proposed language. It was just to respond to some of the things that I heard in the previous testimony. And again, I'm a state employee. I'm not a lobbyist. So I don't have the experience per se that Steve does and the strategizing at the State House. But what I can say is the 6 years that the governor has been the head of this administration, state employees have lost their specialized formulary when it comes to their prescription drugs. We just had the largest battle in the VSEA 76-year history regarding our pensions. And now this year, we are fighting to keep our health care for retirees. This is been egregious. So to hear VSEA's response to the notification of a really exciting deal on September 2nd as hostile is completely disheartening. I have heard from retirees from across the country and actually some abroad who are deeply concerned with the possible change to Medicare Advantage. The work you do here is valid. The work you do here will make a difference to those people. So I am excited to see this language that's being worked on. I hope to see it all the way through. And I just really wanted to commend you for having our backs. So thank you.
Any questions for Steve and Amy? Representative.
Well, again, I understand, Steve, a couple of your concerns. The one that I don't is I don't see where in the wording that I'm looking at that the administration, that it can be exploited by the administration. Again, talking about BE, alternative health care coverage is mutually agreed to, and then it lists the conditions. The one thing that I'd like maybe you to elaborate on a little bit is, if I understood you correctly, what one of your concerns is, let's say that the groups involved do agree to go along with the change, whatever that might be. What you're saying, if I heard you correctly, was you don't want that to limit a bargaining option at a later date or whatever that is. In other words, if they're agreed to in this provision, you still think that the bargaining option should override or take precedent over what happens here. Is that correct?
I think what I would say is, so I'd say two things. One is that, the favored, our favorite approach is the approach that we shared with you. If what the committee decides is they want to take an approach closer to what Damien was discussing and what the committee has on before it now, we are concerned that that would unnecessarily complicate the collective bargaining process, because you'd have a party that's not part of that bargaining process now participating in the bargaining process in some way. But our position is still that the only group of employees or the only group that could be part of a negotiation would be active employees. The statute is clear now that the retirees are in the same healthcare plan as active employees. So if there were some discussion down the road of a change that the two parties in negotiations agreed to, it does complicate it in some way if a third party is now part of that process, having not been in the totality of the bargaining that occurs. Because an agreement isn't just one element of it; it's a whole package generally. So that's just a concern that we have. It's not. I think we would just prefer to keep it simple, basically, and limit the ability of the administration to if they were to gain in the last best offer a Medicare Advantage plan for the active state employees, we want to protect those retirees from then being drawn into the Medicare Advantage plan because of the imposition of that in normal collective bargaining.
Thank you.
Other questions for Steve or Amy? Well,
Can I respond to that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to simplify that because I couldn't follow that. I've sat on, I don't know, 4 collective bargaining negotiating teams, and VSEA is the exclusive bargaining agent for the state of Vermont employees, right? So the way this is written is saying if the state, if the administration and VSEA members meet in negotiations and come up with a deal, this could potentially allow an outside group who's not an exclusive bargaining agent have veto power of that deal. And benefits are a subject of bargaining. So active members at that table negotiate the healthcare benefit that is equal to the benefits provided by statute to the retirees. So allowing a non-bargaining group, committee, team, I don't know what the word is, have veto power over a potential deal is problematic. Am I speaking?
No, I think that's our concern. We think
That was my concern when I read it.
It complicates it in a way that we think is unnecessary. We think that the way to get at this, given that the current statute protects currently retired employees from having this be imposed, outside of that one loophole of that group of active employees, that the simpler way to do it is just to put the guardrails around the active employees. And then that alleviates the need for what we would see as a confusing situation. It's not what we would call it, I think it unnecessarily confuses the situation, but.
Right, and I guess what it sounds like to me is you don't really care about the concerns or vote of the retired state employees.
Representative Higley, that is so not the case. Our retirees, we have a very active retiree chapter who articulates their opinion quite frequently. So this is not a matter of us trying to exclude a voice at the table. It is very much us trying to remain the exclusive bargaining agent as allowed by law around our contracts.
Thank you, Steve and Amy.
Thank you very much.
Stick around. I imagine you'll be interested in hearing the other comments on this topic. Thanks for being with us. So I think the request was that Shelley testify. Okay. So Shelley, do you want to come up next? Good morning. Could you introduce yourself for the record, Shelley?
Okay, I'm glad to be back. I'm Shelley Martin, and I'm the president of the Vermont Retired State Employees Association. You guys have got me all crazy too. And I represent currently over 8,000 retirees, and we have over 2,000 dues paying retirees. So we have a large group of people that I represent. And we don't only represent the 8,000, but we also represent their beneficiaries if somebody was to die. And so we actually have more than the actual retirees. So, and I've been talking to several different ones of them because in our newsletter that we put out, to let everyone know what was going on, I put my phone number in the newsletter. And so I have had constant phone calls from all over the United States and here, but we have approximately 80% of retirees stay in Vermont. So we are a contributing group of people who add to our economy and to our healthcare here in Vermont. And they are very, very concerned. And I do want to thank the committee for trying to help us get a little teeth in our statute that we currently have to protect us. And I have not talked to any retirees who thinks Medicare Advantage is a great idea. They all have said they want to stay as they are. They do not want to change the current health plan. So that's a huge issue. And I've had people that have said that if their claim is denied, and it's not local where they can actually talk to somebody they know, they're afraid that it will stay denied if they're on a plan that's outside, managed outside of our state and controlled by a company that's also run outside of our state. So, some of them have said, I'd rather die than have to pay for what I need if my claim is not taken seriously. So that's a huge concern of retirees, especially since they're aging and their prior conditions, they're afraid would be putting them in harm's way if after the 3 years, suddenly they're dropped. They don't really trust contracts as far as an end date with a company that is motivated by money rather than by the people themselves. And Seth gave me a list of things, so I'm just going to read a couple things. One of the items on the proposal that you have is substantially equivalent. The proposal that VSEA and VRSEA have worked together with continues to say same. And there's no interpretation of the word same. When you say equivalent or substantially equivalent, it could be less than what you have because it's not the same as the word same. And that's really important to us to look at that verbiage in this current proposal. We would like to have the same exact insurance that state employees have, not an equivalent to. Another thing is one of the questions we had asked the administration when they came to talk to the VRSEA is we believed that you can't be forced to be cut out of Medicare. It's a federal program and it's something that you have, that you paid into. And when we brought that up, they made it clear that they won't force us to get off Medicare if we get this Medicare Advantage plan. But we can always stay on Medicare, but get our own insurance plan. We will be dropped from their Medicare Advantage. So you have the choice of either taking what they propose or going out and finding somebody else if you don't want their plan, if you want to stay on Medicare, and you would be dropped from state self-insurance. So that's not really a good alternative for us. And if you can help us with this proposal to stay safe as a retiree, that would be very much appreciated by the retirees. Also, we don't want to be carved out of bargaining. We want bargaining to continue between the union and the state for active state employees. And it's my understanding that if you're over 65 and you're working for the state, you're still on the state plan. You're not treated as a retiree yet. So they would be bargaining for active state employees. And we don't want to be carved out of that in any way. We want the same benefits. And the other thing is we really appreciate you putting into a proposal to include us. VRSEA is a huge part of the healthcare plan for retirees. We talk to our people on a regular basis, and even though I put my phone number in the newsletter and have talked to hundreds and hundreds of people when I'm not doing something else, and as soon as my phone gets cleared out with voicemails, it gets filled up immediately. So I don't have a problem talking to them and reassuring them and letting them know that their message will be heard. So if you have anything that you want to ask me, feel free.
Senator Chase had a quick question. No?
That's right.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, how many of the retired state employees are members of the VRSEA? And to the point that was brought up earlier, that we have an organization kind of loosely defined, but strongly hinting at the VRSEA in the proposed language that's before us. So I'm wondering.
Well, I'm the one that does the data entry for everybody that sends in their dues. And as of last week, we have approximately 2,100. So that's where we are now. And we're going to be sending out another newsletter, and so it could grow. The retirees are a growing group of people. The VSEA has active state employees, but that's a finite amount of people. You can only have so many jobs. The retirees just keep growing and growing. So our numbers can change overnight.
That sounds like a pretty substantial chunk of I think there's 8,000 or 9,000 retirees. Right?
There's over 8,000. And the only reason we know is because the retirement office will not share their contact information. We don't know their addresses. They give their information to our mailing agent, who does not share it with us, but we pay the bill. So we know that we have paid over 8,000 mailings a couple months ago, and we're getting ready for a new newsletter, so that number could be different with new retirees who've retired. I think since our last newsletter, there's been approximately 300 more retirees. So it could be closer to 8,500 than 8,000.
Any other questions for Sean, Representative Higley?
Yeah, Shelley, I guess I just want to ask, and again, I'll go back to B, what talks about that alternative health coverage is mutually agreeable, and your organization is referenced in that. And do you feel comfortable with the wording that we have in this to have?
I definitely do, because there isn't anything that I could believe that the union would bargain on behalf of healthcare with active state employees that would be damaging to the retirees. So I am very happy that we are potentially able to have a voice at the table. The union bargains with all of their, I'm a past president of the union, so I understand their workings. And when they bargain, the retiree chapter is not at the table. All the other chapters are represented in bargaining, but not the retiree chapter. So they're still not represented in the process between the union and the state in bargaining. So, and I agree that we should be named. There could be several groups that claim to represent retirees. And the way the language is currently, it is left to interpretation. And I would rather have it say the VRSEA rather than groups representing them. And I don't know the number, but we are in statute as the group that represents all state retirees. Doesn't matter what you did as a retiree, as a state employee, we represent all state employees when they retire.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for being with us. I think we have.
I gave everybody my business card, and if you have any questions or you want to get in touch with me, my mailbox may be full, but I do take text. And I have an email on the card, so you can always get a hold of me that way as well. And I really thank you for looking after our interest.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that'll give us more time to. Damien, could you potentially answer a couple of questions that I have, and I imagine there might be other folks from the committee. I think maybe we'll start with the thing we heard about most recently. So the Vermont Retired State Employees Association, is there any specific reason why we wouldn't name them instead of having the reference be to the kind of vague reference that we have in the current draft?
So typically we don't name organizations, but there are instances every single year where we draft legislation that specifically names an organization. So if it's the intent of the legislature that it be the Retired State Employees Association, then I would say that in the statute. We don't need to get as complicated as some other states do, where they draft really lengthy language that could only refer to one town or one organization. We could just name them.
Yeah, I mean, I think in most instances, I would want to conform, but if we're gonna, this narrow set of circumstances, I think if we're gonna make a recommendation across the hall, that it might be good to be explicit. Representative Hooper.
I assume that we're talking about only in the context, limited context of this healthcare issue and not going past other provisions in law where the exclusive bargaining agent is described and identified.
Yeah, no, I'm not discussing any changes to the collective bargaining laws at the moment. Mm-hmm. So I'm just referring to what's in the amendment here, which relates to the health insurance.
So this would look like 5 people sitting down in a room. Anybody agree? No hands. See you later.
It's going to depend on how the organizations want to represent themselves in the room.
All simplistic.
But yeah, at this point, you're talking about, as I understand it, the State Troopers Association, the VSCA, the VRSEA, and the state would be the 4 entities at the table. I don't know if there's a retired state troopers organization that's separate from the VRSEA, or if the VRSEA represents the retired troopers.
We do represent everyone.
Okay.
We do have troopers in our organization and as members.
Okay, so there's your answer. And it's worth noting that with the retirement board, we do call out specifically a retired state employee to be elected by the Vermont Retired State Employees Association as a member of that board. So there is precedent for specifically recognizing that organization throughout the statute. So this wouldn't be something completely unusual at all.
Representative Hooper.
So in the language in the proposed amendment here, it says the organization or organizations representing. Does that language open a door for Representative Murwicki and I getting together and forming an organization that proclaims to be representing and move on from there?
As currently written, it would potentially open the door for a new organization to form. If you struck that out, struck out all the words after the in there and replaced it and rewrote that as the Vermont Retired State Employees Association, then and we could call out the Vermont State Employees Association, the Vermont State Troopers Association, and the Vermont Retired State Employees Association specifically. I mean, those are our 3 organizations here. And while there have been periodically challenges to the unions with respect to certain bargaining units, those are still our unions and our Retired State Employees Association, so you could call them out. If you leave it as labor organization or labor organizations, you leave open the possibility in the future that if there is a bargaining unit that forms or that chooses to go with a different representative, that they would also be invited to the table. You could also always just amend the statute at that point. Same thing if, for example, the VSCA chose to change its name or the State Troopers Association chose to change their name. You can always just amend the statute. We often do that. The changing the names, we often do just in a technical corrections bill, if that's necessary.
One last question. I neglected to ask Commissioner when she was testifying if the elimination of Group D was intentional or not, but they are not represented technically by anybody.
Yeah, so Group D is the judges.
Yes.
And yeah, they, again, I don't know, and I can't speak for the commissioner. So I would defer to her, but she was not involved in the drafting of this.
Yes.
So this shouldn't be read as the position of the administration. I certainly can't speak for them.
Damien, you might not be the right person to ask, but they're not, they don't bargain for healthcare in the same way that others do. Group D, the judges, I guess, to put a finer point on, is my understanding.
Yeah, my understanding is that they get state healthcare like other exempt employees, and we get what's bargained by the union. But yeah, so that's my understanding. But again, I would turn to Department of Human Resources to just confirm that or correct me. So can I?
Well, so the judiciary, we bargain the benefits with, in the executive branch with our exclusive bargaining agents there. The judiciary can choose to get that. They could probably go out and buy their own, but they cover their employees with the same benefits that we have for executive branch, just like the legislature does. And then, and I don't know if there's a statute that allows them to do it or they just get to do it. But then the retirees, the same thing. And if they're a retiree, when they retire, if they're on state healthcare benefits, they can keep those when they retire if they meet the eligibility requirements. So judges would be eligible for that as well, just like, elected officials, anybody who's a state employee that's on benefits when they retire can maintain those if they're eligible. So there's certain criteria for that.
But for our lay understanding, it's the judges would have access to the same plan that was bargained by the represented state employees, the bargaining unit, but they're treated more like an exempt, or management employee.
Right. We don't, for healthcare benefits, it's not, we extend those healthcare benefits, the benefits that are bargained for to those employees. So we extend those benefits to exempt employees as well as classified employees who aren't able to bargain. So if they want to get them through the Department of Human Resources, through our plan, they get what they get. If somehow the judges wanted to get something else or judiciary wanted to get something else, they could do their own. But they've traditionally been on the same plans and, the retirement office, as far as allowing them to continue with their healthcare benefits when they retire, uses the same criteria. I believe, I don't know if the judges get, their retirement benefit is different. So I don't know if their eligibility to get the healthcare benefit is any different or if it's 20 years like a typical new employee.
Yeah, I think for our purposes here, we don't need. I'm satisfied. We don't need to mess around with Group D in any of this language. So thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't be kicking them off of anything, I don't think.
Yeah, so just to note, it's according to the treasurer's website, it's 5 years and they're vested in the health insurance for retirement. So they have a little bit nicer deal.
And once they're, depending on how long they've been there, I don't know if that changes the percentage that they have to pay.
It says if they've got 5 years, they'll continue to pay 20% premium. Again, this is just what's on the treasurer's website. So I assume it's accurate, but.
All right, I want to get out of this tangent because I don't think we're considering messing with any of that. So I just want to put that aside. My second question is, Damien, could we make it explicit that what we're describing here is a permissive subject of bargaining? That's come up, the idea that this could potentially, something like this Medicare Advantage proposal could be potentially imposed. We're hearing from the commissioner that's not the administration's intention, but I think we would want to make that explicit if we can. Is there any reason why we wouldn't do that from a language? And
yeah, so it raises a couple of interesting issues. So we can approach it two separate ways. One, obviously this doesn't impact bargaining over active state employees' retirement benefits. So you could specifically call out that retired state employees' benefits would be determined pursuant to this section, which is similar, not identical to what we do with teachers where they have a statewide health benefit. And so we call out that that's not a subject for bargaining under that section. It's bargained under a different section. So the other thing you could do is just put in language that says when you get to the last best offer provision that say neither party shall propose a change to retiree health benefits as part of a last best offer. And if such a change is proposed, the board or the arbitrator is not permitted to consider it or implement it as part of the award.
all right, I'm gonna make a suggestion here for the committee to kind of give me a thumbs up or don't do that. Which we take a break for 15 minutes as planned.
Yes.
Thumbs up on the taking a break. And then we fortuitously, a couple of our witnesses aren't available to talk about this VOSHA issue that they had asked us to talk about at 10:45. So we're going to punt that for a day or two. So what I'm thinking is if it's possible for you, Damien, to come back to us later this morning.
I am scheduled upstairs starting in 10 minutes.
Okay.
But I may be able to squeak out a few minutes. I also have 2 bills on the Senate floor starting at 11. So
Great.
It's that time of year.
So, so would you be able to do two quick things for us to look at, specifically pop in the reference to the organizations as opposed to the more general language that we talked about? I believe the second thing that you described where we're prohibiting this being part of the last best offer is probably the cleanest way of the two things that you suggested to make what would be my intent clear anyway. How does the committee feel about taking a look at a draft that has those two things?
I'd have to think about it over break. The last best offer language as opposed to a subject of collective bargaining.
Yeah, I think what we're getting around in the circle from is this idea that we're, for this specific type of thing that's about retirees having a potentially different substantial plan and wanting to bring sort of the three elements all on the same page before that can move forward. We're getting in this loop that the retirees don't collectively bargain. So it's like we're in this swirl of trying to bring them in without making them a collective bargaining unit that is really tricky. So, Damien, if it's possible to get that done quickly, great. If not, the committee could have a discussion after the break about, because really what we're doing is making a recommendation that the House Appropriations Committee consider some language to this effect if that's what we decide to do together. We're not passing a bill, for instance, so this would be an informal kind of a thing. And we could potentially, say what we want them to try to do and how far we got in our process given the time. So let's take 15 minutes and we'll come back to this when we get back from the break.
All right.
Okay.